Let's take a look at how we would handle some basic parallel processing within Pro Tools. So we have our drum track. I'm going to solo this. Now in Pro Tools, if I wanted to create, for example, parallel compression, what I would do is I would set up an aux return, and then I would set up a send to that aux return, and then I would bring in my plugin of choice. In this case, for sake of demonstration, let's use the CLA 76. And then basically it's just a matter of blending this to taste and making sure that it's solo saved. So here's our dry signal. As I start sending out, we're sending signal to the CLA 76. And now we can blend this in to taste with this fader over here. Okay, so that's how we would handle this in Pro Tools. Now, of course, we could also duplicate the track, the actual audio track, and we could place the compression directly on here. But more often than not, this is the approach that me and most people that I had worked with that use Pro Tools would use. Now let's take a look at a slightly more updated modern approach in Studio One. So we've got the same drum track selected. I'm going to push F7, which is going to open up my browser. Now in the Personas tab over here, we're going to call up a plugin called the Splitter. Here's a little shortcut, something I didn't mention in a previous video. If you know the name of the plugin, I'm going to type the first letter, which is S. That brings me to scope. That's not the one we want. So we're just going to keep going through clicking S until we get the one that we want. There it is, the Splitter. Now I'm going to drag and drop this directly onto the channel. Now when we have the Splitter called up, it is a plugin that functions more as like a utility plugin, but we can do some pretty cool stuff with it. Also worth mentioning that it does have a micro view. We can single click and we have the micro view. Now let's double click this to open up our main channel editor, which is where we have our main options for the Splitter. Also, I'm going to pin this, which is the equivalent of kind of like a Pro Tools target mode, which will allow you to open multiple plugin windows at the same time. Now, in terms of our splits, we have three different split modes. We have normal, which can be seen as a parallel split. So for example, we have our one side and we can blend it with our other side. Now keep in mind, this is happening internally within the channel, and this isn't affecting our fader level over here. So let's set this fader level back to where it was. And also we can adjust things from here, or here. And if you have an iPad or a tablet that's running the Studio One remote app, you will also be able to adjust it from there. So I'm going to command click to reset these both to unity. Now, in addition to a normal split, which we can see as a parallel split, we also have a channel split. And of course, this will give us access to our left and right streams. So for example, I will mute the right output, just here coming in the left now. And let's mute the left, and let's bring the right in. Now, this will allow you to do things, for example, if you ever get in a signal and the skew in terms of the left and right perspective is off, Splitter is something that can be used to kind of fix this. So let's bring these both in. So you see here, even from the information here within the LEDs, I can readjust the left-right balance without adjusting my panner over here. And last but not least, we have a frequency split. Now you can set your frequency split to be, for example, 3, and then this would cover you from your lows and your mids and your highs. So let's say I wanted to extend the crossover over here. So we have our lows. Let's mute the mids and the highs. This is just the lows. Okay, now we'll listen to the mids. We're muting the actual branches or the actual streams. And then in this case, let us bring in our highs. Now keep in mind, we don't just have to mute these, but we can also adjust the levels if we wanted to rebalance these. So I could bring my mids down and I could bring my highs down. So this in itself can almost be seen as a way to rebalance the signal based on low, mids, and highs, kind of like an EQ, if you will. But the mode that we are going to look at today is the split mode. I'm going to leave a link to a detailed video on the splitter that covers all of these modes in further detail, but we're basically going to be looking at a very basic parallel split. So the mode we're going to be in is normal. Splits, I'm going to set this to 2 because I essentially want a dry and a wet. Now, the way that my brain works is that I always see the left signal as being my dry and the right signal as being my wet. One note with the way that the splitter comes in when you use the normal split mode with 2 splits is it makes it so that the left and right, or rather split 1 or split 2 combined together will be the exact same volume as your dry signal. Now, this, if you want to basically have a way to solo out your dry and bring in the wet and kind of dial it into taste, one quick note I'm going to give you is to bring down split 2 all the way and set this to 6, because we have that 6 dB rule when we combine 2. So if we set this to +6, then this is basically the exact same as listening to this dry. Okay, so we have our split 1. As we can see, it's available over here. It's also available over here on a slider, or it's available in the micro view over here and also on the app. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select inserts and I'm going to search for a CLA 76. So we'll use a CLA 76. Automatically this shows up in the first insert slot. I'm going to drag and reposition this to what I consider to be my second path, which will be my parallel compression path. And the way that I see this is basically the same as I work in Pro Tools, is that we have our track, we have our send, and then we have our return over here, which has our parallel compression in Pro Tools. So that's the way I'm going to set this up in Studio One. Now this has already been pinned, so we can double click now and open up the CLA 76. Now also, if you click the splitter, the icon over here, then this gives you access to this information in terms of being able to mute the outputs and adjust the levels. Now I'm going to leave the level 1 set to +6 because this is my dry. And all I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to enable this, so the power, it's been activated, and you can see over here that it's not muted. And then I'm going to dial this in, and then we'll just kind of bring up this fader as if though we were bringing up an aux return fader in Pro Tools. So first things first, let's set some basic levels. We'll go to fast attack, fast release, and let's go to all buttons in. And I'm not even listening, I'm just kind of doing this over here by eye. I can drive the input as little or as much as I want. Maybe we'll drive this a little bit harder. So that looks like it's definitely going to be giving us some level. And now let's dial this up. Massive level difference there. Now, one thing that I really like about the splitter in particular is that when you talk about doing parallel compression in Pro Tools, for example, if I wanted to solo out the aux return, if I just wanted to be listening to, let's call it the crushed path or the crush bus, it can be a little difficult, and sometimes you have to toggle to a pre-fader send and everything like that. And it can be a little difficult to do that in the context of the mix. But when you're working with the splitter tool in Studio One, this is really easy because we can actually just deactivate the dry path entirely. And now we're listening to just the parallel compression path. So I can really dial this into taste. Maybe I want to get this to really match the timing of my track. Maybe I'll switch to this mode. And then I can turn it off. And then of course we can bring it in and dial it into taste. Bypassed. Of course we can also do this in multiple areas. Like I said, if you're running the Studio One remote control app, you can do this from within there itself. Now, this in itself is an entirely new way of working because everything that you're doing in terms of the parallel processing is done entirely on one track. So we don't have to worry about pre-fader sends. We don't have to worry about anything. We can very easily cut off the dry, listen to just the crushed signal, or we can cut off the crushed, listen to the dry. Very easy to blend them. And the other thing is directly from within this track, if I wanted to do any additional processing, like let's say I wanted to put after this, after I'm happy with this blend between these two signals, let's say that I wanted to put something like, for example, a limiter. This is something we can do. I'm going to go to the inserts and I'm going to go to my Sonox limiter, Oxford limiter right over here. And now this limiter is being applied across everything that's happening. So these two signals are being combined together, as you can see through the graphic, the dry signal and the wet signal. Think of this as if though we took both of these signals over here, the dry drums and the drum crush, and these were both went out to an aux channel, which then had a limiter on them. And that relative blend between everything can be maintained. Now, the great thing about this is that this is all happening pre-fader, and we don't have to worry about pre-fader sends or post-fader sends. Now I can just dial in my limiter to taste. Maybe I want to bring my output trim down a little bit. I want to push something into this. Maybe I'll use my enhance mode. And once I'm happy with this, then I'm just blending this with one fader to make it work within the context of the production. Once you're happy with everything, we can just single click our micro view, close our channel editor, and then we can mix as normal. If ever you want to see what the signal path is though, with respect to anything that's happening within the splitter, a simple double click will allow you to open this up and do this. Now, another thing that I like doing sometimes is you can right click in this band below over here, and you can give this plugin a very particular color if you want it to stand out and you want to be able to differentiate things. Now, again, if you wanted to, for example, add 3 splits, it's very easy. If you wanted to also add maybe some parallel distortion that was happening in another split, all we have to do is cycle this up to 3. And in this case now, I could add something like, for example, let's add decapitator. So go to decapitator, it will automatically add decapitator in a given spot, and then I could quite simply just drag and drop this. If I wanted to isolate or solo what I'm doing with decapitator, we can do that either through the channel editor, or if we use the micro view option, we can click to deactivate the dry, click to deactivate the parallel compression path, and then now, since this plugin is pinned, which is equivalent to Pro Tools target mode, I'll open up the decapitator, and we can just punish this, right? We can do a crush. Maybe I'll bring the output down, and we'll use this slider to do that. Push the drive even further. With our parallel compression. Dry, parallel compression, parallel saturation. In context of the whole entire mix, I want to really isolate that decapitator. So like I said, this is like an entirely different way of working. And once you get used to it, it can become quite a powerful tool because of the simplicity that allows you to stay within just a one channel workflow where you have one fader to manage, and then any gain staging or activating and deactivating to solo these different parallel paths can be done really easily, either by double clicking the channel editor or directly from within the micro view. So that's it for this video. I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.